in between times.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, awesome.
Yay. You can hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Welcome to In the Act, a radio program on process and the creative life. Creativity does not just start and stop with artists. We all make aesthetic or guiding decisions. Our aim is to talk through the process and investigate how we choose to express ourselves and live creatively. We're connecting with people about their lives. That is the subject of our show. Broadcasting from Mead Public Library in Sheboygan, Wisconsin on Mead Community Radio, I'm Erica Hunsinger, and this is In the Act. And today's guest on In the Act is Ger Xiong.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. We caught you.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So I love when this happens, but you're a visual artist.
Yep.
Interdisciplinary multimedia artist. But I saw your work before I met you, which is always really fun when that happens.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had that in your experience, but I was like, so then when I met you, I was like overly excited because I really liked the pieces that were in the art center, in the John Michael Color Art Center. So I was like, oh, hey, hi. So thanks for still agreeing to come on the podcast when I was like super excited. So
no, thank you for coming out and talking to me and inviting me to be here.
Yeah.
No, it's great. Like, I feel the same way with artists too. Like, I have a lot of artist friends on Instagram. Like, I know their work on their Instagram that I never meet them in person.
Right.
So it's great seeing the work and then meeting them in person.
Yeah. And that is a really unusual. I know there's like so much people have like such like, oh, you know, social media is kind of bad or whatever. But I find so much joy in being able to view specifically other artists' work and their exhibitions and their timeline and their feeds, you know, and to be able to review like in that platform. I just think it's really, really awesome.
Yeah,
so.
There's a lot of cool things out there. Seeing it on their Instagram is really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was hoping that we could talk a little bit about how do we I don't care really how we construct it, but I really do want to get into like your culture and the fabric of yourself, like how you kind of came to where you are right now, because I think it's quite a vast and interesting and beautiful, challenging journey.
Yeah.
It's a heavy opener, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I like that opening. So I'm not sure where to start, but I'll start where I enjoy like full circle things. So I grew up in the Fox Cities, Appleton, Wisconsin. I always tell people that we would come down to Sheboygan every summer to swim at Lake Michigan by Deland Park.
Love that.
So like I was telling you, like we would jump off on the side going towards the lighthouse.
Yeah.
And swim.
Seems so crazy to do.
Swim at the deep end over there. The pavilion right by Deland Park is very iconic to my family. We just hang out, ate there, played volleyball in there.
Oh, yeah.
So did all sorts of things at Deland Park. So being able to come back here as an artist, but also as like 25 years later is really great for me to kind of re-explore what it means or what Sheboygan means to me as an artist now or as a person now and during this time of my age.
Yeah.
So kind of going back, so my family, kind of a little bit about my family history here. We arrived in Wisconsin in 1993 in Green Bay. So my family's resided in Appleton since 93. We came as Hmong refugees of the Vietnam War. And then I came here with a single mother of I think there was about 7 of us at the time. One of my sisters was already married. but yeah, we resided in Green Bay, and then I went to school at UW-Whitewater, so all my upbringing is in the Northeast Wisconsin area.
Wow.
And then went to school in Whitewater, at UW-Whitewater, and then moved down to New Mexico, Las Cruces, New Mexico, for graduate school at New Mexico State University. And then I knew I wanted to come back to the Hmong community. I grew up really kind of
Because it's a really vibrant, rich Hmong community here. In
Yeah. I think Sheboygan, like I remember my talk. I forget the specific, but Sheboygan's ranked, I think, around like number 3 or number 4, the most populated Hmong population within Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So it's like almost right behind either La Crosse or Dane County.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I knew like I wanted to come back to the Midwest, and wanted to kind of reintegrate myself into the Hmong community in the Midwest. So now I'm residing in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm still fairly close to Wisconsin here, so which is kind of nice. So I can still visit my mom from time to time.
Oh, that's so sweet. I love that.
Yeah. But yeah.
So I'd like to backtrack a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What did you always feel like you had like wanted to be a creative artist, or was it just sort of like woven into like how you grew up, or like was it part of your culture? Like how did you become interested in like using your hands for creative purposes?
Yeah, I think I've always wanted to be an artist. I think when I was a kid, I'm not sure like what kind of artist, but I always liked working with my hands.
What did you do when you were a kid?
Well, we were just building things. So we would build like I think my initial career I wanted to be was industrial design or in architecture.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I've always loved building things with my hands. My mother is also an artist, so she does a lot of sewing and embroidery work. Cool. And then my dad was also an artist. So I feel like I have like some sort of bloodline that artists kind of come, like some sort of art kind of comes through me in a way.
Right. Yeah.
But I also like remember like playing Monopoly. I also chose the artist as the career goal or the career in Monopoly.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Or is it Monopoly or life? Or life. Life, not Monopoly. Sorry.
That's
the
awesome.
Game of life. Sorry.
Yeah,
the Game of life. Yeah, the Game of life. I was chose the artist.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
So I've always wanted to be an artist when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then I don't think it was up until undergraduate work where I started to kind of specify which route I wanted to go towards, because you have to declare an emphasis with your BFA.
Yeah.
So I think during that time, I was really kind of exploring my identity as a Hmong person during that time.
Yeah.
And when I was doing a lot of, I love to draw and stuff, but I was a terrible not artist, but a terrible student when I was drawing, because I always waited in kind of last minute to do all of my drawings and paintings.
I mean, because it was just so boring. All those things, like
yeah.
And I was they felt like tasks, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I knew like I could knock a drawing out in like a good 24 hours.
Sure. Yeah,
I just do it in like the day before I critique, which is not a good way to go about it, but that's how I did it. But I essentially, my background in my trainings in metalsmithing and jewelry. So in the metal studio, you actually have to be in there, right? You actually have to use the tools.
Right.
You actually have to use the equipment. So it kind of slowed me down in a way where I had to go into the studio and sit down at my jeweler's bench.
Right.
And actually do the work there. Otherwise, I won't be able to produce anything.
Right. But also, that's like, you're 2D versus 3D. Like maybe 2D was just like, this is not me. Like I can do this, but this is not like where I'm driven to spend the time. Like the 3D is like...
Yeah, and I think I felt much more connected to the process and the material too. I think that's one of it. I think during my time at UW-Whitewater, I was really kind of like seeing how much like metals and jewelry kind of played into not just my studio practice, but also my cultural practice.
Yeah.
My cultural history. So when I was doing and creating work during that time, I was really delving into what Hmong history is and what it was. I grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, but all of my like education was in the Kimberly district area.
Okay.
So right next to Appleton, a much more white space, white neighborhood.
Yep.
Where I really assimilated into the white kind of community there. So. Like meaning like I spoke a lot of like English. I lost a lot of like my Hmong cultural heritage and language during that time. So I think it was really during undergrad where I was beginning to like explore what that is and what that meant to me as a person and as an artist.
Absolutely. You mean like losing that?
Yeah, losing that.
And refining it.
And then refining it during.
And
like,
why do you
process.
why do you think, I just want to pause really quickly because I think it's really important that, I mean, what do you think are some of the reasons why that you lost it? You felt like that you lost those pieces.
Yeah, I think definitely there wasn't much space. I love kind of looking back or kind of thinking about my nieces and nephews now. I feel like there's much more space for them to kind of explore their identity.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
during my time, there was either you're a Hmong or you're not Hmong.
Right.
So you either assimilate to survive or assimilate through. I think assimilation has like some sort of forced assimilation or having some sort of agency in your assimilation. And I think during my time was really kind of like I didn't want to be Hmong, you know. I wanted to assimilate into this white space because I didn't know anything else, and I saw all my friends were all white, and I had no other outlet or other space for me to be Hmong.
And we want to be accepted.
Yeah,
we want to be part of a group. We want to be loved. You know, like we want to have those things, and to feel different when you're growing up in those ways, I think, is really, really hard. So thank you for talking about that. Yeah.
And as a kid too, right? So I think. So now I think with like the generation after me, I think we are a little bit much more aware, and we kind of navigate and help navigate the next generation to what. I kind of asking what does it mean to be Hmong for them?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. And so when you were, and thanks for sitting in this little space too. But like when you were trying to like redefine and reconnect, what were some of the pieces that you felt like were hinge moments that you were like, you know what, I really need to reconnect to myself, into my culture? Like what were some of the things that you were like, hey, this is something that I need to get back to?
Yeah, I think one of the like very pivotal moment was finding these cassette tapes that my dad was telling when we were living in the refugee camps.
Wow.
So my dad actually passed away a month before I was born. So I never like knew who he was. And it was like my early 20s, and I like found these cassette tapes like hidden in a duffel bag in my brother's closet. And I was like, you know, I would go home from college and just like search through stuff because I'm curious, and I found these cassette tapes. I was like, what the hell, like what are these? Like it was like it said my dad's name on there, and it said like the year and everything on there. So I forgot if I told my brother if I can take them, but I took them anyways. I took them back.
How many were there?
There was 2 or 3, I forget. I think at least 2. So I found these cassette tapes, and I think that was really the moment where I was like, okay, like actually like kind of really answering your question. Like that was really kind of the moment where I'm like, okay, let's evaluate or reevaluate what it means for me, like as a Hmong person.
Wow.
So I think that was.
Had you ever heard your father's voice before?
No, that was the first time.
Wow.
So I have a really great mentor at UW-Whitewater, Teresa Ferris. Before listening to it, we digitize it to make sure that it doesn't get deleted or affected in any way in the cassette tapes.
Yeah.
So we had a really good professor, Bill Miller at UW-Whitewater. He digitized all of it, and then And then it was then finding a cassette tape player,
Yeah.
and then listening to it. And then so I have it digitized and then listening to it. So I feel like that was a moment where I'm like, okay, I think this is where I think my brain kind of started to click and be like, okay, like how then now as a Hmong person out there listening to these tapes.
Wow. So personal, so like jarringly personal.
Yeah,
and,
it is.
Recentering, grounding. Like this is your father. And wow. That's really, really powerful.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I feel like that was one of the very big moments, not just like as an artist, but as a person.
For sure.
Yeah. And then that kind of segued into a lot of what my work is about now, and what it was about then. It was kind of looking at loss, what it means to be Hmong, but now kind of what it means to be Hmong, how to have agency in being Hmong, and then how to reclaim our Hmongness in a dominant space.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Hmong history and culture is really kind of this yearning for something and yearning and longing for something. Just because as stateless people, how do we navigate our identity?
I think that's a great point. Stateless people, because I maybe I'm obviously more than I do, but is it that Hmong people originated in like the mountains in China and then migrated into different areas, like they were forced out?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So like the southern part of China, and then through like heavy taxation, forced assimilation, were pushed down. I think Hmong folks were already living around in the like the northern parts of Southeast Asia, such as like Vietnam, Thailand, and Laos. But then it began to push a lot of families down to that northern part of that area. So now you have Hmong folks in those regions,
right? But not a country that you call home.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Right,
and
wow. So when you're talking about longing and loss and this identity and trying to, like the parallel between that and losing your father before you were born, and like that, all of those pieces like coming together is like a really powerful thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think, I was going to say something. I was going to talk about the war a little bit, but I think because I feel like Hmong history has there's so much consequences of war in Hmong history, and that's what a lot of like elder folks always constantly talk about is the war, the Vietnam War, the Second War. And I'm sure prior to that too, a lot of them were probably talking about the war in China and how they were forced to assimilate and forced to move to the southern parts or the northern parts of Southeast Asia. So I think a lot of my interests are kind of looking at what are the consequences of war, and how do you navigate, how do you grieve these histories. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, I feel like Hmong history and culture, there's a lot of heaviness to it, but there's also a lot of beauty, and not just like the warfare and everything, but the resiliency and also the agency that we have in where we are today. Yeah.
Welcome back to In the Act. I'm Erica Hunsinger. We're here with Ger Xiong. Thank you so much for being here and sharing about your experiences. I'm so moved by this conversation. And in our break, we ended the last segment talking about the war and the secret war, Vietnam War, and that your elders focus a lot on that. But that you wanted to also share that there's beauty and resiliency, and that's your you wanted to highlight that.
Yeah. I think there's really kind of power into the resiliency of. I guess I look at my mother, like my single mother, who like was able to fled here to the United States after the war, and just how she's been able to survive throughout these years as a person.
Yeah.
In a place where she didn't know nothing of.
No.
Didn't know how to navigate, didn't know how to have income, or didn't really know what was happening. So I think I really kind of look up to her as a person who was able to survive and have all this power to survive.
Absolutely.
So I think I kind of reflect and sit on that too within my work.
Yeah. How do you think it translates into your work?
Just material wise, I've been working on these replicated French Indochina coins. So historically, when French occupied and colonized Indochina area,
of course,
these coins were in
French and English,
circulation,
my
right?
God.
Yeah, these French Indochina coins were in circulation, and they were in silver.
Okay.
So Hmong silversmiths would melt these this currency down because it was silver, right? And they would repurpose it into our jewelry and into silver bars. So there's a lot of colonial properties to that, but there's also a lot of like reclamation, I think, that comes with that, right? Like the act of destroying this colonial coin.
Totally.
And make it into something else, even if...
For adornment and like...
Exactly, yeah. And it has a lot of history of the opium trade that was happening during that time, but I just love the act of resistance, the act of power, where they're like, you know what, like, I don't care what this coin is. I'm actually just gonna melt it down and put some of the power to it. I'm just gonna put it into our jewelry because that's what's important for us.
That's incredible. That's a great transformation.
Yeah, so I love that act of like disrupting the act of power there.
Yeah.
So now these coins, we're still adding it into our garments, but they're just silver plate or brass now.
Yeah.
No actual currency, but I'm kind of doing that same thing to that material, kind of drilling into them, cutting them apart and reassembling them and reattaching them, and kind of giving new meaning to what these materials are.
Wow.
So I'm reattaching them, meaning I'm like cross-stitching them with Hmong patterns and Hmong colors.
Wow.
To create wearable works and wall installation work.
Wow. With Hmong patterning too?
Yeah, Hmong like embroidery and textile patterns.
And how is there? I don't know how Hmong patterns and text. I mean, it's beautiful, but I don't know how you would describe it.
Yeah, let's see. There's patterns. There's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of so textile wise. There's a lot of cross stitching.
Right.
Applique work, reverse applique work.
Right.
A lot of batik work.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so indigo dye, batik work. And if you look at if you're familiar with some of the Hmong textiles, they're quite fluorescent. There's a lot of spirals that happens within it. And then these patterns are just repeated throughout.
And are there for the specific patterns that I'm thinking of, do they have also a symbolic meaning to them, or does like the fluorescence, for example, do those have like a symbolic meaning?
Yeah, no, I'm not sure about the fluorescent, because that material is not really like it's not organic at all, not natural at all. But like the pattern itself, like the spiral meaning like longevity, the heart meaning love, and then the leaf will be life. And then stacked, and then if you repeat those into different patterns, you'll create other patterns of meaning. But a lot of people actually, throughout the Hmong culture, we're still trying to figure out what these patterns actually are because they've been lost in translation for so long.
Right.
So when I was doing my Fulbright research in Thailand, I was very curious on where these patterns are coming from.
Yeah.
And I was asking them, like, do you know what these specific patterns are? And a lot of them are saying, like, a lot of it has been lost. But if you're really interested in that, you have to talk to the people or the Hmong elders who migrated from the southern part of China to the northern part of Southeast Asia. So only those people that lived or have history in China really know what those patterns are. So yeah, so a lot of those patterns have been lost for years and years now. I think it's been fairly recent that scholars are refining what these patterns mean
Right.
and what they actually are.
Because the other tricky piece here, right, that's that there wasn't a written language, written Hmong language, right?
Yeah, correct.
So there's not the written language to go back and review. Like there wasn't a Hmong encyclopedia. Like there's English encyclopedias and different because they were nomadic in a way, right? So they So
and even if there were like written languages,
so
I
hard.
think it was a lot of it was erased and lost during our time of forced assimilation too in China.
Sure, right.
So what we have now, that didn't really come until like the 1950s until it was finally kind of have the written language that we have now.
1950s.
Yeah,
Damn.
yeah.
Yeah. So in some sense, like the taking of the old coins and melting them down and creating them into these jewelry pieces for their costumes or traditional wares and for celebrations specifically, right?
Yeah.
There's also a new movement then since the 50s, right, of reclaiming in that metaphor of like, how do we re-find ourselves, redefine who we are now?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think that's what's a lot of like artists and Hmong artists are doing now, which is really great. Like finding and refinding what it means to be Hmong by using and utilizing these patterns, and these traditions of culture as a way to talk about identity.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think I just flashed on one of your pieces that incorporates some pop culture, like commercialized pieces too. Then I would assume that sort of talks about that sort of accordion feel between two cultures.
I was think the one that seems like it was at the Coca-Cola one or at the McDonald's and Coca-Cola one.
Both.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. When I was when I was in Thailand, my proposal kind of shifted in a way where I wanted to look at the commercialization and commodification of craft. And how that relates to identity or Hmong identity in ways where we're continuously commodifying our identity to fit into these spaces.
Can you talk more about that? Like, where does that happen? What are you talking about?
Yeah, so like when you're in Thailand, you'll see like all of these storefronts or a lot of storefronts, whether they're Hmong or non-Hmong or not Hmong, selling craft or consumable craft. So textiles, jewelry, mostly textile-based work.
Right.
So I'm kind of looking at it in a way where like when they're selling work, right, they're interested in what the consumers are interested in.
Yeah.
So that craft kind of shifts into the consumer needs.
Absolutely.
So I think I'm very interested in it as a metaphor of identity where we're shifting our identity to fit into what the consumer or the people or the dominant state is.
Dude, yes.
So that becomes this kind of sort of assimilation into what's quote unquote normal or what's,
Absolutely.
So I'm using I'm using these like Americana products as a way to talk about like commercialization and also globalization of identity.
Yeah.
And
Whoa.
How identity is commodifying, but also how to reclaim identity on top of these spaces. So I love kind of disrupting these, I say dominant materials, meaning like Coca-Cola that has now consumed is now consumed and globalized and all throughout the whole world.
Right.
And putting and disrupting that material with my Hmongness. So again, with Hmong patterns and colors and symbolism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really strong.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I was thinking about you're talking about like culturally assimilating and selling those crafts, but I think individual artists do that as well. Is that if you sell for profit your work, you're eventually going to be aberrant from who you are, 5-10 years from now, because your decision making isn't then based on yourself and your inside, but it's based on the consumer and what they want, right? And so if you're constantly forging your path of your artwork towards what people are going to like or buy, then you're shape-shifting yourself to assimilate.
Yeah.
Right?
To fit into those spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think about that often too, just as an artist, like sometimes it's hard when you're trying to apply for these museum spaces and they're very focused on particular pieces. So it's hard to be like, how do you be a part of that, but also be kind of, I don't like using the word authentic, but having some sort of agency in your work and knowing that the work you produce is actually great, even though if it doesn't fit into these spaces.
Right. And how do you not get, how do you have to have enough work to show.
Exactly.
And like good enough words, not like mine right now, but like to say that like I'm not going to make something that's like this, but when I get to the museum or when I'm going to do this show or installation, it might change because my environment's different and the culture here is different and I feel differently and I'm thinking different thoughts. And so it'll morph. And, trusting artists to trust that process is so imperative, I think, for institutions. But
no, and that's kind of good. Like circling back to the Coca-Cola can, I think that's exactly what I was kind of doing there. Like I cut these cans into rectangles, drilled holes into it, and then cross-stitched them into a very large tapestry, and then recorded myself kind of crumbling it a few, like almost 7 times. This act of refining and then also reforming identity. That it's not really this static kind of way of living, but we're continuously kind of fluid, right? We're kind of moving and changing all the time.
Absolutely.
So kind of this refining, but reforming and then coming back together and then refining again.
Right.
Who you are. So yeah.
Because we're dynamic beings.
Yeah,
it's always changing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is that one of the is that one of the pieces that you feel like really presented what you wanted to say the best for where you were?
I think so, yeah. I recently, like, I don't really consider myself a performance artist in any way, but I think there's some sort of performativity that I'm very interested in the work. This idea of, like, this versatile, I know, like, action of disrupting or changing things, like crumbling things up. So recently, I think I've been, like, crumbling a lot of my work up. I'm just interested in, like, this idea of beauty, but also like destroying it, and then that beauty kind of shifts and changes.
But it's not really destroying it. I mean, I'm also watching you. I wish you could people could see. You're just doing this like as if you had a piece of paper or a can or a large can or a stuffed animal, and you're kind of pushing it together and opening it back up with your hands in this sort of like undulating way. And it's really beautiful, but you're not necessarily, when you're crushing it, you're not destroying it. You're just shape-shifting it, right? You're just like, it'll become something else then.
Yeah. I think that exhibition, Cloth is Land, was something that I've been wanting to explore for a while now. So that space and that exhibition kind of really gave me time to produce that work.
Yeah.
And I think that's the work where kind of propelled me to the work that I'm creating now. And I'm excited about that.
What... twofold.
Yep.
You talked a tiny bit about performance within that exhibition at the Art Center, which I can't remember what the name of it was now. What?
Cloth is Land.
Thank you. Cloth is Land. But then also it propelled you into the new work. Can you talk about both of those things?
Yeah. So the performance work, I actually, when I graduated graduate school, I told myself I will never do performance work again.
Why?
Because I just don't think I'm a performance. Like, I just don't like performing.
Yeah. Because you personally don't. Yeah, okay.
And it was also like always like in grad school, it's like you're doing things and they're like, well, did you think about performing it?
Right. I know.
I just like everything always shifted towards performance work. But during that time when I was creating this large wearable, like 15-pound bracelet, we were going to have suspend in the air and kind of shift and rotate.
Yeah.
But the motor broke down, I think, a few times. And then...
because of the weight?
Yeah, the weight.
So how heavy was this bracelet?
15 pounds.
15 pounds. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was like almost like a ceiling fan motor.
Yeah.
I think it was too much. I forgot the specific motor.
Yeah.
It must have been for like the rotisserie motor where it's spinning in a circle.
Sure. Yeah.
But it broke down a few times. And then it started going the day before. And then it broke down the day before and it actually fell down. The motor fell down. So the exhibition team was like, yeah, I think that if we can't have this during the opening because it's for safety reasons.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, that's fine. So now it's just a static object in the space. And then so I was talking to Tanya about it and we were kind of like, I was kind of going back and forth. I was like, yeah, maybe I'll perform it. Maybe I won't. And then I'll see how I feel during the opening. And then it happened. And the opening was going. And then I think I was like, okay, I think I actually should perform it because I wanted to activate the work.
Yeah.
Instead of just having it there. And
why did it need to move?
Still space. Yeah. So I wanted it to move and I wanted to people.
Why?
Oh, why?
Yeah.
Why did it need to move?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted people to see kind of the weight of the piece.
Yeah.
Because if it's static, right, people don't see how heavy it is.
Yeah.
That's why I really wanted it to move. So I was like, okay, I should perform this so they can see me dragging this bracelet, this 15-pound bracelet around. And these coins are all hand cut that says I am Hmong on there. So kind of looking at this laborious ways of being Hmong, the labors of being Hmong, what it means, the labors of retaining culture.
Right.
Yeah, so I wanted people to kind of feel that instead of seeing just an object that's on a pedestal. Yeah.
My hands are sweating. This is so fun. So this is our last segment then. Is that true? That's true, right?
It is true.
Wow.
It really flies by. Is
that true? Like, I do this all the time. What am I talking about? Hilarious. You know, we're crafting it as we go, right? So,
yeah, I love it.
Good. Welcome back to In the Act. I'm Erica Hunsinger. We're here with Ger Xiong. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And we were just talking about the weight of the bracelet and why it had to move. And, you know, frankly, thinking about it, what a difference it makes than seeing it on the human form, seeing it on you, seeing it with you, you carrying it versus it being on a fan. You know, or not a fan, but like on a motorized thing. Like it doesn't have it is removed from the source in a way. Which is fine too. I just think it's really interesting.
Yeah, and they sent me a video of it moving in the space, and exactly what you're saying. I think that missing component of a person, kind of dragging it along. It definitely changes.
Man, that human touch.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it changes
the fingerprint of the human, even in movement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the performance. Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get to how then did those pieces inform some of the work that you're doing now? Like what were you thinking about? What shifted? Yeah.
So I'm currently the artist in resident at the arts industry at Kohler right now. And I'm still using that same material, the colonial French and the China coins. And I'm really kind of re-exploring grief and loss as during a different part of my life versus when I was in my early 20s.
Those are profound things to sit in and to do artwork about, by the way.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I mean, I know you said it, but that's a really difficult thing to think about, feel, and produce.
Yeah, well, thanks. It really is, yeah. So I've been looking at creating these larger wall installation, larger installation-based work where there are removable pieces from these larger works. And I'm interested in what's missing within a larger installation in the one day, in hopes that that missing piece can kind of go back to that larger installation. If that
So you're
makes
actually
sense.
removing part of it from the installation
Yeah, so
and housing it somewhere else?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So
Yeah.
The missing pieces are actually donations to the Art Center and the Kohler. And
Whoa, man.
my thoughts for that is that one day these pieces maybe possibly can come together again, or if they don't, that's okay. But conceptually, I'm trying to conceptualize that in a way where, like, if I show this work somewhere else, these other works can maybe one day come back and fit that other work, so that this
Absolutely.
work in the art center will always be connected in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What a profound metaphor for finding home.
Yeah. That's actually really great. Yeah. So yeah, and so the exhibition for Clocking In, that will open up in December 14th, this upcoming weekend here.
Okay.
And it'll run until mid-March. So that's kind of where I'm at with kind of how that Cloth is Land exhibition has kind of moved me into this direction of kind of the concept and the work physically, and then also the material of the work.
Because this wasn't a solo show. It was Cloth. Why can't I get that? Can you tell me that
Cloth
again?
is Land. Yeah.
Cloth is Land. Tanya, I'm sorry. But it wasn't a solo exhibition. This was can you tell a little bit about that exhibition?
Yeah, so it was a group exhibition. The curator was Pachia, who lives in the California area. They asked her to curate a specific Hmong show with Hmong artists. So she chose specific artists. It was me, Paho Her, and then Cha Her. And it was three of us kind of looking at the exhibition. Looked at Cloth is Land, meaning what's our relationship to indigeneity.
To what?
To indigeneity.
Wow, I've never heard that word
Yeah,
before.
what it means to be indigenous.
Indigeneity.
I have a hard time saying it too. Indigeneity. Yeah.
Indigeneity. That's
Yeah.
great. Thanks for doing that for me.
Yeah. So we're kind of looking at land. What's our relationship to land?
Yeah.
Because I think in Southeast Asia right now, a lot of people there are kind of they're really arguing for indigenous rights within the Southeast Asia area.
Okay.
With other like Hmong and other ethnic groups. So we're coming in kind of asking, what does it mean to be indigenous, or what's our relationship to the term indigeneity or indigenous?
Yeah.
So a lot of the work was responding to that question. And I particularly literally looked at how much displacement and assimilation has removed me from that term, because I wouldn't consider myself indigenous at all, because I don't have any sort of relationship to land that a lot of Hmong folks in Southeast Asia actually have.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah. So we were using cloth, but also other processes as a material to explore that kind of question and that idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
And to not, again, getting back to those ideas of loss and, talking about indigeneity, right? I got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's another translation is sort of home, right? Is where's your home? What is home? And finding, I think the beauty and interesting things about artists is you guys are always trying, I'll put myself back in.
Yeah, please do.
We're always trying to to find the analogies and the metaphors and the parallels and the patterns and the things that make the most sense or symbolically can link us back to what I know you said you didn't really like the word authentic, but like that like true line for yourself, and to be responsive around that, those ideas for that exhibition seems really profound.
Yeah.
And unique. Like there's not, I don't, yeah.
Yeah. And there hasn't been a space where, like I would say, like contemporary Hmong artists who take up space within these institutions and museum spaces. So that was really the first time where we're like, hey, we have three like contemporary Hmong artists, and we don't see that often within institution and museum spaces.
Right.
And oftentimes a lot of our artworks are really kind of pigeonholed to like the traditions of craft, like the craft that they know of, right?
Right.
So it was really a great, I think, profound time for us to be like, hey, like this are the traditions of crafts, but there's also other artists that are doing other things that are not always pigeonholed into these other types of making.
It's not the storefront craft.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys have taken it and melted it down.
Yeah, exactly.
and transformed it into your vision of like yourself, and you're reconstituting, Yeah,
exactly.
In today.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Super exciting, man.
Yeah,
I gotta say.
But yeah, I'm excited about what the really kind of the future holds within like Hmong arts.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of great arts out there.
Yeah.
But
are there galleries that are specifically like Hmong owned and galleries?
Not that I know of. I know there are like Hmong museums, which does a much more like educational base programming, but not like specific galleries. There's Sia Gallery and in Singapore, but that focuses on Southeast Asian and Asian identity.
Gotcha.
Gallery space. Right.
We need it all.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. So nothing particularly Hmong.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So while we're sitting here talking, is there something that you'd specifically like to share or talk about your work or yourself or things you're thinking about?
Yeah. So I've been at Kohler for about 3 months now.
Yeah.
And we're kind of winding down. Like I was telling you before, where like I'm starting to pack and everything. It's our last week.
Wow.
And Sheboygan here. So this past 3 months, I've been really thinking about, and I'm always interested in where a Hmong person has been. When I was living in New Mexico, I like love going to the library and looking at like seeing if there are any like Hmong books there. I found a couple actually. So that means that someone was studying, or there's someone there that was interested in the Hmong art.
Someone in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
it's crazy. Yeah. So like I was like, okay, so I found a couple books. So someone there is actually like has some sort of interest in the cultural history.
Right.
And I think about that as a Hmong person, like where has a Hmong person been? Where has it taken up space?
Yeah.
And how did they do it?
Right.
Because I don't think there was a Hmong person or a Hmong artist that has done the residency at Kohler, the arts industry before. And I've been thinking about, I hope that this is not the last time that a Hmong person will ever be in that space.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, so I've been thinking about how to take up space, and then in hopes that this won't be the last time a person or a Hmong person goes through that space.
Yeah.
And so it's been on my mind, and I'm hoping I'm leaving like some sort of footprint where people can find, or future generations of artists can kind of find and go.
Yeah.
And be a part of that space. And I myself is very interested in the lineage. So my mentor at UW-Whitewater actually went through the arts industry program. I think in the 90s. I really don't quote me on that though. I forget the specific year, but I think it's the 90s. So I was kind of telling some of the artists that it's kind of crazy that I'm cleaning the same machine that my mentor has cleaned the machine. So it's the same machine that our hands have gone through.
Crazy.
And
how fun.
We're like dragging the same carts, dragging the same amount of sand, wiping off the same like resin-based sand. Putting the same kind of oil and grease onto this machine. Like so many hands have gone through those machines and these spaces, and I feel really fortunate to be a part of that.
Totally.
And it feels really great to be a part of that lineage in that space.
I don't know if my reflection right now is like I've been trying, being like the host, I'm like drawing lines between things. I'm like, I have you in Vietnam and then coming to Green Bay, and I have this line there to Sheboygan, and that this is like this bounce between St. Paul and Sheboygan, but Sheboygan from Appleton because this was your vacation land, and you're back working here and have an exhibition, and how profound that just bounce is between those two spaces. And then Las Cruces, and like trying to find the lineages and, talking about tapestry. So maybe I'm like thinking about lines in that way, but it feels very mappish in my head to try and organize all the spaces and touch points of what you've been talking about and your culture and your history and like this like macro micro landscape. It's been really fun in my head. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you for sharing that, because thank you for kind of mapping it out, drawing it out, because I love seeing that. And I love you kind of talking about like all these different places. So thank you for sharing that. Like, this past week has been really reflective. So I thank you for kind of reminding me about that.
About that. For sure.
Yeah, I love, and I also love maps. So
Nice. Is there anything that like moving forward, like into what your next space and ideas are, how do you approach these transitions for yourself? Because this is a big transition to end. And I think as just humans, when we have like major transitions, it's hard. It's both good and bad, but it's a disequilibrium that we have to manage. And so like, are there things that you do to help you move through these spaces or time frames? Yeah.
So I usually prepare on, like I kind of write down, I from time to time would journal. So I started a journal again when I first came to Sheboygan, starting the residency.
Oh, cool.
Just to journal and reflect on my time here. So that helps a lot. And then I've been kind of reaching back out to just some friends in St. Paul and saying, I'm coming back.
I'm coming back,
let's hang out or do something. So I usually, when I go back to St. Paul, I usually go to like my favorite like restaurant joints, kind of get back into the swing of it.
Nice.
I usually try to take some time off, but I'm going straight into a fellowship when I'm done here to St. Paul. So I'm hoping that I will actually have some sort of break from now until the fellowship.
And can you talk about what a fellowship is for people who might not know what that is?
So I recently received the Minneapolis College of Art and Design Jerome Fellowship.
Oh, cool.
It gives you a certain amount of grant, a certain amount of money, and then this specific fellowship is from now until 2026. So we'll have a year from now to work for a specific exhibition that will happen at the MCAD's exhibit gallery space.
Awesome.
So the grant money is to use for traveling, materials, and equipment. So we're able to use the school's facilities.
Fantastic.
We'll have some studio visits with critics, and then we'll have some sort of essay written about our work at the end of it.
Wow.
So it's really a time for you to create work and make new work and explore different ideas and really experiment with what you want to do with the work and the time that you have, which is really fortunate.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so you don't necessarily, going into this fellowship, you don't necessarily have a pre-plan of what you're going to do. You're going to just keep going with all that your momentum, the things that you're thinking about, and have that sort of inform your work as you go.
There was some sort of proposal for the application. So I proposed working with the coins and then interacting with the Hmong community with the coins in the St. Paul area.
Okay.
So I'm doing like community engagement and then also an installation for the exhibition.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
So I think that year will help me like find community within the St. Paul area.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. So yeah.
Well, that's super. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there, I also, being in like learning, a learning institution here at the library, are there books or anything that you've read that have really spoken to you about or over the years that stand out for you that you could share?
Yeah, like recently, just any books.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think this past year I was reading a lot of Ocean Vuong's work. His poems are really great.
VANG?
VUONG.
VUONG,
Yeah.
okay.
A lot of his work looks at identity, but also loss and grief. So the book that really got me kind of rolling on his work is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. Kind of talks about his identity as a person, but also his identity as a queer person, grieving the loss of his mother. And then that kind of moves on to Time as a Mother is when his mother passed and then he wrote that poem collection.
Wow.
About grief and loss. So I think a lot of his metaphors and the ways he writes is very beautiful.
Yeah.
And he's just a really cool and caring person too. So it's really great, like seeing and reading his work.
That's awesome.
So his work is really, it's like there's a lot of care in the words that he's writing.
Yeah.
And the ways he writes.
And I love that you feel that similarly with your work, that it resonates.
Yeah. And I had his there was a visiting artist at New Mexico State that recommended me to look up his work. So now I'm like obsessed with his work.
Yay! Yeah, I love that because we need each other. You know, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of wrapping up. So, if people wanted to find you, how could they find you if they wanted to reach out or learn more about you?
Yeah, you can find me on my website, Ger Xiong, GerXiong.com, or at Ger Xiong 55 Instagram.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, this has been an absolute treasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for finding the time to do this with us. And I'm super excited about your work, and I wish you all the best. And glad to know you. Yeah,
thank you for having me. I really appreciate you reaching out and reminding me about this. I wanted to do this when you told me about it at the Art Center, so it was a good reminder. So I'm fortunate to be here. So yeah, thank you again. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Huge thanks to Mead Public Library, the fantastic Melissa Prentice, Josh Littner, Annalisa Finca, the radio committee, our amazing engineer John Tully, and for the title, Photo and Fabulous theme music composed and performed by Cooper Deers.
In the Act is produced in the studios at Mead Public Library in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. More information on the web at meadpl.org.